And welcome back to this exciting tutorial. This is the final in our long series on creating a procedural sci-fi landscape with Blender. And here we are in After Effects, ready to finish things out. Okay, so I just want to start off by saying not everybody has access to After Effects, and I understand that. It's an expensive piece of software. So this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. My purpose in showing this final step in After Effects is because this is the software that I use every day on a daily basis when I'm doing my work. So when I'm creating stuff in Blender, I always bring it into After Effects and composite there. So I want to give you that full picture of that workflow so that if you do end up using After Effects one day, that you'd be able to see how I'm working with it too. Now, for those of you that have it already, that won't be an issue, but I just want to acknowledge that not everyone's got this. You can still learn the fundamentals of compositing, but After Effects is pretty specific, and so it's not very transferable necessarily. That being said, if there's a lot of you watching this that don't have access to After Effects and you really want to know how to composite in Blender, let me know in the comments and I'll put together an extra tutorial covering that. Now, we can't do as much in Blender as we can here, but we can still do a fair amount, and it's worth having some knowledge of that if you don't plan on going to After Effects. There are other great tools like Fusion, which has a really great free version. It's a different type of compositing, probably an even better one technically if you talk about node-based compositing versus After Effects, and it's the way it uses layers. But that's really beyond the scope of what we're going to do, and we're just going to land this thing here with After Effects. So to get started, let's go ahead and create actually we won't create a new composition. We're going to just import our renders from before. So go ahead and switch to your project view and right click, import file, and navigate to the render folder that you have all of the renders in. Now this is where mine is. I'm going to go ahead and bring each of these in. Now when you click the first frame of your image sequence, if you've never worked with an image sequence before, you want to make sure that you tick this little box here. This tells After Effects to bring these in as individual frames, and it uses the number at the end to know what order to bring them in at. So I'm going to select PNG sequence, pick the first frame of my first render layer, which is background, and click import. And there it is. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring in all of my layers one at a time, and you do the same. And once we've got that done, I'll carry on. Okay, I've brought in all of my layers now. Now, the first thing I need to do is set up how After Effects is going to interpret these layers. So you can see right now it says that it's bringing it in at 30 frames a second, but that's not right because we actually rendered this at 24 frames a second. So we want to get that setting correct. So just select one of them and right click on it and go to Interpret Footage and Main. And right here where it says 30, we're going to switch that to 24 just to match what we did in Blender. Then, so we can quickly apply it to all the others, we're going to go to Interpret Footage and Remember Interpretation. Now I'm going to shift select the others that are left and go back to interpret and apply what we just remembered. So now each of these are set to 24. Okay, I'm going to grab Rockspire, our main one, and I'm going to drag it right down here to the little composition icon to create a new composition. Now, first thing you want it to do as well is just make sure that we're set to 32 bits per color. This is probably, if you've just started working in After Effects, this is probably set to 8 and linearize is turned off. So this is what After Effects looks like normally. Now you can see it's not any different really from what we had before, but we're going to increase things up to 32 bits per color because we're going to be using glow and a couple of the color effects. And so we want to have really nice sort of graduated fall off. And we'll get that if we use 32 bits per channel for colors. So let's switch that up to 32. And then sRGB is fine for the working space. And I'm going to click linearize. And this is going to linearize our color. So it's not going to be applying any look to the color. This is sort of a technical backend thing, probably beyond the scope of this tutorial to fully explain. But whenever I'm working in After Effects, I use these settings. 32 bits every time, sRGB every time, and I linearize it every time. Once you set this once, you never have to set it again, so I don't really have to worry about that. But I find that this works really well for getting the kind of fall off that we want. Okay, so we've got our Rockspire in place. So let's just have a quick scrub through. Things are looking pretty good. I might zoom out so we can have the full. I'm going to switch it to fit so we can see it. Yeah, great. Now it looks really good. Now, first kind of thing to do would be to RAM preview this and just spot check to make sure we don't have any errors. Like I can see, we've got a little bit of flickering. See in our background here, the glows that we have are kind of flickering, and that's coming from the noise reduction that we used and not quite having enough samples. We're getting this little variation, but this isn't going to be actually an issue because we're going to add so much more into this scene that's going to kind of hide those problems. But just at first glance, everything looks really nice. So go us. Okay, first thing I want to do is add in some atmospheric smoke that's kind of blowing through the scene. So let's do that. We're going to create a new, so right click down here and go new solid. We want it to be the comp size and click OK. Doesn't matter what color it is. I'm going to grab a effect called fractal noise, one of my absolute favorite effects. There we go. And we're going to switch it from basic to dynamic. And that gives it kind of this puffy cloud look. Now I'm going to go to transform and I'm going to change the scale a bit. I'm going to make it a lot bigger. And I want it to kind of be rolling and moving. And evolution creates this great smoky looking kind of transformation. So I want this to progressively change through the scene. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click on the stopwatch. And I'm going to type in time times 100. And that's going to take the current time of our playhead and multiply that number by 100. And that's going to give us a nice motion to our smoke. And it's just going to animate itself. It's a great way of using expression to save time as opposed to using keyframes. Okay, that's cool. And then I also want it traveling from one side of the screen to the other. So I'm going to offset the turbulence. So I'll go to the first frame, set a keyframe, drag all the way to the end, and set another keyframe. I'll hit the U key just to quickly drop to what I've animated. And I'll just click on the little circle here to add a second keyframe. And I'm going to drag this out, not too far. I don't want it to move too fast, but kind of a nice, slow, gradual motion. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so next we want to kind of figure out like where to isolate this or how to hide stuff so that the smoke has some depth to it. So we're going to use our fog layer for that. So I'm going to bring in my fog layer, drop it over the gray solid, so it's the layer above it, and we're going to use a track matte. Now, track mattes are probably one of the most confusing parts of After Effects if you've ever tried to understand them. Basic gist is underneath, by the way, if you can't see this here, these little buttons hide different stuff. So if you want to, if you might have just one of these visible, you can toggle switch modes and that'll toggle between them, or you can just turn them all on so that you've got access to it. I'm going to turn off the time duration because I never use that. But okay, so track matte, there it is. So we want to set a track matte for our smoke layer. So we've got just 4 options: alpha matte inverted, luma matte inverted. Because this is a luma matte, so there's no alpha information in this. If I switch to viewing the alpha, it's just going to be solid white because there's no transparency here. It's just white and black values. So I'm going to use luma, which is white and black values. So we'll click on the gray solid, which is our smoke, and I'm going to go luma matte. And now what it's going to do is it's going to use those white and black values to basically cut away our fog. Now it's got some real depth to it. And as we move through the scene, it looks like it's actually in the scene. But we got a little bit more to do to make it look real. So let's drop down the transparency of our fog. So that'll drop down the amount that it's affecting the scene. And then we're going to use a tint effect to change the color of the smoke. So let's go to tint, drag that onto our gray solid. Let's go ahead and rename the gray solid too so we don't get confused. So this is smoke. And we're going to change the white value, maybe to like a blue or something dark like this. Yeah, that's kind of nice. I might bring the opacity up a little bit. And I want to kind of cut it off so it's like it's just traveling along the bottom here. So I'm going to select my smoke and I will hit G to grab my mask tool. You could also just get it from up here. And I'm going to just do this. Create a nice kind of flowy shape. And hit F to bring up the feather mode. And I'm going to feather it right out. So now we've got this nice kind of smoke that's going to be traveling through our scene. So if we switch down to half res and just preview that, you can get a sense of how it's looking. You can really see it here. So yeah, that's nice. It's just kind of subtly traveling through our scene. Maybe a little too fast. No, I think it's good. We'll leave it like this for now. We're gonna have another one. I'm actually gonna double this up. So let's select these two and hit Control D to duplicate. And for this second one, we're gonna go and first we'll change the seed so that the noise is different. And then I'm gonna change the scale of this one. I'm gonna drag it right down so it's really small. And I might back off the contrast a little bit. I might back off the contrast on this one too, to be honest. There we go. And so with this other one, I'm going to make it move a lot faster. So I'm going to hit U to bring up the keyframes, go to the final keyframe, and I'm going to drag it out a little further. And I might back it off. So now we have kind of two speeds of smoke traveling through our scene, which just makes it feel a bit more realistic. We also have two, they're interacting really well. So it just looks good. Yeah, that's nice. We can also bring it forward a bit more if we place a levels on our fog layer for smoke 2. If I move the levels around, what it's going to do is basically bring that smoke forward or back. So I can bring it forward a little bit and show you the effect of what's happening. If I solo this layer and bring our opacity back up, if I'm changing the gamma, you can see how it's darkening and brightening bits. It's like moving, the position of the fog, basically. Bring this back down. Hide it again. Kind of bring it in so it's kind of cutting through our scene a little bit more. And I might change the mask on this one as well. Bring this bit down. It's feeling a bit heavy-handed. Here we go. So now it's cutting through some of our more foreground rocks. Great. It's looking really good. All right, next I'm going to add in some like embers kind of flying through the scene and sparking. So to do that, I'll just minimize everything so we can see it. Might drag this up to give us a little more room to work with. And I'm going to create a new solid. And this one we're going to we'll call this Embers. And we're going to grab an effect called particle, Particle World. There it is. Double click it and it'll automatically apply. And we want like basically these embers kind of flowing through the scene. So what we'll do is we'll go to physics and I'm going to turn the gravity off to start with. And instead of explosive, let's try jet sideways. I think that'll do us. And we're going to change the size of our producer. So radius Y, drag that up. And don't need to worry about radius X because we're going to move this off to the side and like shoot it across the scene. But we are going to increase the Z depth because we want stuff that's like really far away and stuff that's close to the camera. I might even move it away from the camera a little bit so we can get a lot of that. There we go. And I'm going to move it off camera. So position X, we're going to slide it over here just so it's like creating it and then sending it in. Now we need to increase the longevity so that they last long enough to cross frame. And yeah, that should be pretty good. Also, if I go back to the beginning, you see there's none when we start. So we can hold the particle release, or what we can do is, that's if we wanted to start it later, I think. Yeah, because you can't go negative. So we have to drag the layer back in time. So in essence, what it's doing now is it's starting the particle ejection like way back over here and moves it. And so, anyways, we've moved it so that when our scene begins, we've got them interacting. So I'm going to change my birth rate. I'm going to just drag that down so there's not too many of these guys. Might bring it forward a little bit again on the Z value just to get it intersecting a bit more with our scene. And let's see. I think this will work. Okay, now let's change the particles. So instead of a line, I want to go with a motion polygon, and that's going to be these little triangle guys. I'm going to take my birth rate back up to 2. Now that we've changed it, it looks like, yeah. I'm also going to turn motion blur on for this layer. So if you find the little circle icon, just tick it for that, and it'll turn motion blur on automatically for the scene as well. And then let's see. I might increase the velocity. Let's see what that looks like. It's getting there. All right, let's give it some extra stuff. So I'll put extra on it. This just kind of makes it go a little bit crazy. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, now we're getting all these kind of wild angles. It's looking really good. Now to make it kind of like an ember, we need it to be red. So let's, where is it? Birth color, there we go. Let's make it start off kind of like an orange red. Oh, that's pretty good. There we go. And maybe the second color, we could pump that one into the orange values a little bit. There we go. Yeah, cool. It's looking really nice. The ones in the distance look like they're just kind of dancing around. That's really cool. All right, now to really kind of get this to feel like it fits in the scene, we're going to do the same thing we did here with the fog. So I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate, bring fog up over Embers, and set Embers to use a Lumimat. And then I'm going to bring up the opacity so we can bring them back into the scene. And I'll use the levels effect that we had on there from the other one. And I'll just see kind of how it fits if we pop it to the background a little bit. Yeah, that's good. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and hit Control. I'm going to select the Embers and the fog, Control D to duplicate. And for this Embers, first thing I'm going to do, change the random seed again so it's different. And then this one, I'm going to change my radius right down to 0 on the Z depth. And I'll position this one so that we are just have a bunch of bits that are closer to the camera. I might even drop my velocity down on this one. And I'm going to drop the producers down on this one, so we just have a few of these. And what this one I'm going to do is I'm going to have it so that they're in the foreground and not in the background. So I could invert this possibly, or we could even just get rid of. I think I'll just get rid of it. So we're not going to have a track map for this front one. All right. And let's see, I might back off the ones in the back a little bit with the opacity, because remember, subtlety is always key. Effects work really well together when they're subtle. Let's drop the producers down. Oops, do we have the right one? Yeah. Drop it down. Again, so we just have a few. There we go. That's cool. So now we have a few that are kind of passing in front of everything, and then a bunch more that are going on in the background, and they're being affected by the depth of our scene with this fog. So that looks nice. Now what I might do is with the front ones, put a bit of a glow on them. I think that could look really good. So let's go for our Embers here, and I'm just going to pull up the intensity and the radius, and then I'm going to duplicate that. So there's 2 of them, and I'll increase the radius again so the fall off is just a little bit nicer. And just see how that looks. We are getting a bit of a shadowy kind of black rim around these now. Sometimes the glow effect can do that. So I'm going to switch my blend mode from normal to add, and that'll help get rid of that. Looks pretty good. I'm really noticing the fact that we don't have as much velocity on these guys now. So I'm going to bring that back up into physics and velocity. Just drag it right up. They're really going slow in the background. Maybe a bit of initial velocity. All right, let's try adding a bit of gravity, but change the gravity vector from down to 1 on the x-axis. So hit 1 for there. Now they'll definitely be moving. Speed that up a bit. There we go. Now they're doing what I want. Maybe a bit too much. And I might bring this one up a little bit more. Just kind of tweaking stuff. But I think that looks pretty cool. Yeah. Awesome. All right, next up we need to add some land into the background. So we've got this little gap here that we need to put a bit of a landmass. So to get that right, what we're going to do is create, again, file new, solid. And I want it to be, let's see, I want the land to kind of flow like this. So I'm going to have the layer selected. I'm going to have it turned off just so I can see everything. And I'm going to hit G to select my mask tool, my pen tool. And I'm just going to draw out basically like just a rough landmass. It's probably going to be a bit too extreme. There we go. And close it off. Turn it on. So this is where our land's going to be. I'm going to give it a little bit of a feather, maybe just 1 point of feather. And then instead of fog this time, we want to use the environment, so the background. Now, the trick with the background is that I'll just solo it. There's no alpha information in this one either. So all we've got is the black here and then the sky. So what we should have done is actually change the sky for this pass and make it fully white so we could have a luma map, but we don't. We've got all the color and it gets pretty dark. Thankfully, because we're in 32 bits per channel, if we go up here in the info panel and hover over, you can see that the RGB values, we still have a bit of information up here. So it's not fully black, whereas this is all zeros. So we might be able to pull something out of this and still use it. So what I'm going to start with is a luma mat. So what luma mat does, not luma mat, luma key, that's what it's called. So luma key is going to key out the dark values or the light values, depending on what we want. But one of the problems is you can see that 16 next to the effect. This is only an effect that works in 16 bits per color. So if I drop it here and I tell it to key out the darker and I give it a threshold value of 1, it's going to take out not just the full black stuff, but all this as well, which wasn't full black. But because it's only 16 bits per color, it's only looking at that level of depth. So that happens to mean that this darkness is pretty much the same as this. But the landmass isn't going to be this high in the sky. So this is actually going to provide the matte we want. We really just want this area as the matte. So let's just clean it up a little bit. I'll just give it a bit of feather and maybe 0.2 edge thin. Does that do anything? 1? No, it's not edge thin it. Keep it as is. And tolerance isn't really going to make a difference for us. So we'll just keep it at that. So 1 and then edge feather of 1. And I'll hide it. And then I'll select our landmass and I'm going to go alpha matte. Now, if I go back to the beginning, you can see that that's giving us the matte we need for these bits here. Now, we also want to change the color of this. So let's go fill, and we're going to drag a fill onto it. And we've got a lot of other things affecting the color. So I'm going to just solo out our main layer. And I'm going to grab a color from here that makes sense. So maybe like one of these grays, this dark gray. Let's see what that looks like if we unhide it. We also need to drag it below all of our embers and fog and smoke. So right here, so it's just above our base layer. So now you can see it blends right in. So that looks pretty good. We also need to keyframe it because we're moving. You can see it doesn't really look right. It sort of drops out of view. So we want to maintain its position. So I'm going to do a keyframe there, the position value, and then I'm going to go all the way to the end here, and I'm going to drag things up until it's kind of roughly in the same spot. About there. I'm going to hit the U key to bring up those keyframes, and I'm just going to go keyframe assistant, ease in and ease out, because our camera starts at a complete stop and then gradually starts to move. So there we go. Oh, this is looking great. This is going to be really cool. You can see by the time we get to the end here, it's starting to look really dramatic. All right, so 3 more things we want to do. I want to add in some grain to the scene, a little bit of glow, and a vignette. So we're going to use 3 adjustment layers for that. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. We'll call this one vignette, or just, I don't even know how to spell vignette. I always spell it wrong. I always want to go vignette, right? But I know there's a G there somewhere in vignette. I'll feel free to, you can correct me. All right, so ellipse tool, and we're going to double click it. That'll make it fit the layer exactly. And we're going to grab a curves, and we're going to drag it on. We're going to take the white value of the curve at the top. We're going to bring it right down, and we're going to give it a little bit of a dip. That's going to darken everything right off. We're going to click inverted, so it inverts the mask. And then we're going to hit F to feather, and we're going to drag that right out. So it's nice and feathered, and then T for the opacity of the effect, and we're going to just drag that down so that it's just present a little bit. And what this is going to do is it helps just draw our focus in to the center. All right. So then I'm going to go new adjustment layer, and this time we're going to add some glow. I'm going to put it underneath that one, because we want the glow to happen first and then the vignette to happen. And with the glow, I'm going to just drag up actually I'll drag down the intensity just so it's like a little bit there, and I'll duplicate it. And with the second one, I'm going to make the glow radius a lot bigger, so we've got a nice fall off. And I'll just back this one off as well, so it's just there a little bit. Subtlety is key. That whole double glow effect, it's awesome. Credit to Andrew Kramer, Video Copilot, taught me everything I know. If you haven't found his website yet, go check it out. Video Copilot's great. You'll learn After Effects in like a week. You just power through his videos. All right, that glow's holding up nicely. Okay, last thing we're going to do is adding our grain. So we're going to create one last adjustment layer. This one's going to go right at the top, and add grain is the effect. Now this is going to give us a bit of filmic grain. I'm going to switch from preview to final output, and we're going to go intensity down to 0.1. I think it's good, and size as well, maybe 0.5 on the size. That's pretty good. Maybe 0.05 on the intensity. Yeah, that looks good. Nice. Just gives us a real film look, having that grain there, and it really kind of ties everything together. Okay, let's think. Do we have everything? I think we do. I think that's everything I want to do to it. Let's see. We got fog, egg matters. Yep, that's it. Now we rendered out a matte for our egg if we wanted to do something to that, but I'm actually pretty happy with the way it looks. I don't really want to change anything, so that pass is sort of redundant for us. You can use it as a Luma pass if you wanted to change the egg. You could change the color of the egg with that specifically, or do any number of interesting things. But I'm going to leave it. I think we're good. So our camera move kind of moves and then stops, and then immediately the animation ends, because we only redid the frames that we needed. But it's kind of nice to have a bit of a hold once we kind of establish our end frame. So what I want to do is right-click in the comp and go Composition Settings, and instead of 250 frames, or this might be seconds for you, depending on like if you've got this set to time code. If you go Composition Settings, it'll show you time code, but just add on a little bit more. So like we've got 10 seconds here. I might go, I don't know, 15. Take it to 15 seconds. And I'm going to zoom out so I can see the whole thing. And then on each of my render layers, I'm going to select them all, right click and go time, enable time remapping. And then I'm going to drag them out. So time remapping enables us to extend that final frame out. So nothing's really happening, but if we grab all of our effects and grab them and just drag them out one by one, then what we end up with is this really cool kind of ambient scene that is still very much alive. Okay, so one other little thing I've noticed, if I'm just doing a little RAM preview here, this is at half res, but you can still see it. There's a little pop in the background right there, where it suddenly goes brighter. I don't know if you can see it. You'll probably notice it on your end when you're watching it back if you've got this issue. And it happens at a few places. And if you're a perfectionist, then this kind of thing is going to really annoy you. It's going to really just kind of stand out as, oh, there's some kind of error in your render. And we want to try and get rid of that. Now, it's coming from our fog layer. I can tell just by looking at it. So I'll solo this out. I'll just have a look. Yep, see, there you go. See how it pops? So this is the problem that's happening here. This is actually coming from the effect that we use in Blender. So when we normalized our Z depth, evidently it can't handle all the gradation. I'm not sure exactly why it's done this. I've never seen this problem before. But maybe using normalize isn't the best idea for getting something out that we want to use for fog. It's probably best just to stick with the straight Z depth fast. Make sure you're set to 32 bits per channel and import it and work with it that way. But we've got this problem now, so we need to find a solution. Now, if this was a deadline, let's say, and I was doing this for a client, I needed to get this thing out. I don't have time to go back and re-render the whole thing. So this is a problem. I need to fix this error without having to go back to a render. So I need to get clever to do it. Now, what I would do here is because it's a shift in the gray values, then if we just use a levels effect, we should be able to easily hide it a little bit. So I'm going to go over here to levels, and we'll just work on this one that this clean one that we've just dragged in. So I'll grab that, pop that on there, levels, and I'm going to find the exact frame where we have the problem. Where is it? There we go. Okay. So it changes right there. So we're going to set a keyframe at that point and move to the next frame and set a keyframe here too. I'm going to hit U to open up the keyframes, and then we can just click that little dot here. And then I'm going to move 5 frames forward. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Add another keyframe. And then go backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now all these keyframes have the same value, so we're not changing anything yet. And now for this one, if we just look at the difference between the two, you can see it just suddenly gets brighter. So let's go to this first keyframe here, and I'm just going to shift the gamma so that the scene's just a little bit brighter. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm not going to try and match things because that's just going to be way too hard. Instead, what I'm going to do is try and have both of them change a little bit so that we can have this transition, this 5 frame kind of be like a slow transition back to where it should be. So if you watch that, the effect now, instead of a sudden 1 frame change, it's like we have this little flash. Now we still have a pop kind of visible here, but I'm hoping it'll be less noticeable. So let's find the other spots where this happens. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to just select, if you click on levels and histogram here and just hit copy, it's going to copy all the keyframes that are selected. We're going to go to the first frame of the first keyframe, and I'm going to turn this one off, and I'm going to find everywhere where I've got fog. Now, some of these we're using a levels effect already. So if I was just to paste this in, it's going to add it onto this effect, which is not what I want. So I have to click levels and hit Control D to duplicate. And then with that one selected, I can paste it on. Same here. We're using levels again. So Control D and paste. And this one doesn't have one, so we can just paste it on. And that's everything. That's all the fogs. All right, that's good. So that's definitely a little more subtle. And we could tweak that a bit further to kind of help polish it out a bit. But you get the gist of how that can work, just to kind of soften the blow a little bit. I still feel like I see this one a little too much. Anyways, I hope that helps a little bit. But that's one way of being able to get around that. And actually, if you've got time, the better thing would be go back to cycles and render it out and to get that proper pass. So our final step is to do our export and our render. Now there's one little funny setting that we need to be aware of if you're working in 32 bits per color and if you're working in a linear workflow. Again, the objective with that is you get this really nice fall off with all of your blending layers and your glows and everything. It's just giving you just the best possible result. But in order to maintain that, if you just rendered it straight out as like an H.264 to upload to YouTube, it's actually going to change a little bit. The gamma is going to look different. When you look at it, it might be a bit darker, a bit brighter than what we're looking at right now. So to get it to export in a way that preserves exactly how it looks, we need one setting in our render to be turned on so that we can get it to work. So let me show you what setting we need to do. So what we're going to do is we just make sure our composition selected, and we're going to go composition, add to render queue. Right here where it says lossless, we're going to open this up. I like using QuickTime as my wrapper, and my format, I like using DNx HD. It's a really great codec to use for rendering, and it does compress a little bit, so you're losing a bit of information. ProRes can shift your gamma, which can kind of be a pain. Animation really preserves things just as they are, but it can be like huge file size. This is a really nice compromise. Now, you see we're doing this at 8 bits, not 32 bits. So that means this video that we output with this format is going to be something that you could then compress down to H.264, and it'll look the same because it's 8-bit to 8 bits. But the trick is making sure that transition happens. Sorry, I know this is a bit confusing. What you want to do is set those and then go to color management. And here's the important bit. Convert to linear light on for 32 bits per color. We're just going to turn that off and then click OK. Now, when we render our rock spire, it's going to look exactly the same as it does here. So if I was to just show you that, I'll just grab a cool moment, maybe here, just a few frames, and go back to the render queue and click render. So now that I've rendered that out, I'll just, drag it down here, and if I hit play, sorry, I did such a small amount. There we go. You can see that it looks great. It looks just like we expect it to. Now I can take this, and if I was to then pop that into, let's grab Media Coder, for example. Now, if I go into Media Encoder, I can take what I've just rendered out, drag it in, and I can let it go H.264, and let's say we want to shoot it out at YouTube 4K Ultra HD, and we export that. It'll look exactly like we want it to. Fix. Hardly see any difference whatsoever. So that's how you can get the best quality into something that's low quality. Well, that's it. We've done it. We've reached the end, 10 episodes, and we've created our sci-fi scene. I hope you've really enjoyed doing this. I know I have, and I hope you've learned a lot through the process. I look forward to sharing more tutorials with you. I'm working on the next series now, so keep an eye out for that. It's going to be dropping soon, and I hope to just continue to keep pumping these out. So if you've enjoyed this series, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, please like and subscribe, ring the bell if you want to get notifications when the next episode's going to come out. Yeah, we'll just keep going with these. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please make a comment in the videos. I'll try to answer any questions that come up. So if there's anything like that, please let me know. But hey, once again, you're awesome. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you've learned something great. I will catch you next time.